presentation. If you have a question or would like some clarification on a slide that we're on or a topic we're on currently, at the top of your screen, kind of centered, there's a chat option, and go ahead and put any questions that you have as we go through the presentation into there. It'll be monitored by Lucas during the presentation, and we can answer those questions that come up at the time on the current slide that we're on. So with that, I will get started here. So the topic today is, as I said, covering injury and illness reporting requirements to the department. For some of you, this may be a refresher. For others, this may be the first time that you're seeing this and getting just general knowledge on the report of how to submit it. At any time, should you run into an issue or have require more involved questions with something, reach out to an inspector. We're here to help you. We'll have contact information for all of us at the end of this as well. So what is an injury and illness report? It's an annual report that's submitted to our department and is similar to the OSHA 300A that's submitted through private employers in the state. It's due to DSPS by March 1st and is completed through the ESLA portal. It must be posted February 1st through February 1 through April 1. And the posting requirements require that it be posted in a conspicuous place. Typically, most employers post it where any of their meetings or notice boards are at for their employees. It's not intended to be posted to the general public. It's a question that we get quite frequently from reporters, if it needs to be posted to the public, and it does not. It's just for internal and for employee notifications. Another topic that is asked frequently from individuals is, can something other than the DSPS summary that's generated be posted? And it can, as long as it's an equivalent form and providing equivalent information that the DSPS injury and illness report summary that is generated from the ESLA portal provides. Another topic not listed on here, but to discuss, a lot of questions that we've gotten is based on remote employees and how to make sure that remote employees or employees that are not at the office are able to see it. We have allowed individuals to post on a summary board. Say you have an online intranet that your employer uses, you can post the summary there as well. Summaries must be kept for 5 years, and it's a unique report separate from workers' compensation. Workman's compensation is a little similar, but not as detailed as this is and what's required to be reported. So don't kind of compare it with workers' compensation. It's different, and we'll go over some of those in the presentation here. When your report is submitted, this is what the summary that is generated looks like. After the injury and illness report has been submitted through our ESLA portal, this is emailed to you after successfully submitting it in a PDF version. This is the summary that can be posted or that is posted for the employees in the employee kind of posting area that we discussed. Which work-related injuries and illnesses need to be recorded? Deaths, loss of consciousness, days away from work, restricted work activity or job transfers, medical treatment beyond basic first aid is kind of the general summary of what is reported on this injury and illness report summary to our department. Instances in which workman's compensation has determined that the injury is not work-related are also not reportable. It does happen occasionally that the workers' compensation will determine that the injury was not work-related. Those do not need to be reported to us. If there is a high likelihood that the injury if the determination did not put it to workman's comp, but there's a high likelihood or an understanding that the injury likely did happen at the employer, those typically are reported. If you get into a situation like that, reach out to one of your safety inspectors and we can provide greater clarification as they're more on an individualized basis. Other reportable incidents that happened, needle sticks with contaminated needles. I know last year we had a question on a needle stick if the needle was not contaminated from, say, a new needle or an unpackaged needle. It's needle sticks with contaminated needles that are reported. Medical removal from work, and then another one that we see is hearing threshold shifts. Exclusions for the determination of not medical treatment. So these are things that would not apply and get submitted on your injury and illness report. Although depending upon the severity and the circumstances around the injury, your workman's comp may cover some of this if they were to go to the doctor, but these are specific items that are not reportable to us. If it's observation only, they go into the doctor, they're just simply observed and there's no further treatment done. Any diagnostic procedures, so if they have an x-ray, if they have an MRI, those are considered diagnostic procedures. And if they are alone by themselves and just using for a diagnostic, they're not reportable to us. First aid. The definition from OSHA for first aid is listed there. Basically, it's anything that can be done on a one-time short-term treatment that doesn't require any specialized training or injury, working through the injury with it, like burns, supplying a bandage, a Band-Aid, removing debris from an eye. So anything that can be done basically at home is the classification that I look at it from, is considered first aid and is not reportable. We have some examples in here that we broke out: cleaning a minor wound and applying a bandage, removing debris from an eye or flushing an eye, treating a sprain with cold or hot therapy, so ice or heat, use of sling, the use of a non-prescription over-the-counter medication, ibuprofen, Tylenol, things like that, and immunizations such as tetanus shots. Those are all classifications of they're not reportable to us as medical treatment. So here's a couple scenarios to go over in cases. The first example for a non-medical treatment would be an employee who is injured and taken to the hospital by ambulance. At the hospital, the employee is given a CAT scan and an x-rays. No further treatment is needed, and the employee is sent home and advised to take an over-the-counter pain medication and ice the injured area. Because this CAT scan and x-rays are considered diagnosis and there's no further treatment above and beyond basic first aid, with icing the injury and taking an over-the-counter pain medication, that is not reportable to us on the injury and illness report. Second example, an employee is cutting wood and has a piece of sawdust go into their eye. The employee is treated at a walk-in clinic where they use water to flush the eye. No further treatment is required. In this scenario, first aid, since flushing the eye with water to remove debris is considered basic first aid, even though it's done under a medical setting, it's still considered basic first aid in the report's information. Lucas, do we have any chat? And I see some numbers or an icon going up there. Do we have anything to stop for? Or if you just want to holler at me?
Questions about slides. Just some questions about slides, if they'll be provided afterwards. And yes, they will. This will be provided on our website under the publications drop down, which I've included a link to in the chat. And also, if anybody wants a copy of the slideshow as well, feel free to shoot me an email directly. I'll put my email in here and we can get those out to you as well. But other than that, no, Andy. I should check to make sure one person, Kathleen Shear, are you able to hear the presenter now? If you could put a thumbs up next to your message. If you are, that'd be helpful. I just want to make sure everybody can hear.
And we'll have a recording of this as well. And I'll actually later on in the presentation show where you'll be able to find it from our website. We have last year's published, and I'll show you where that can be found on our website. Usually it's about a week afterwards. So we'll have that out as well.
There's another question that came in, two of them here. What about a concussion and then losing work?
If it's and Tim chime in, Tim Connon's one of our other inspectors here, and he may chime in some of these answers. If it's work related, the concussion happened at work, they lost time, or they had an injury that, they sought diagnosis that went above and beyond basic first aid, that would count, especially if it has a loss of consciousness with it.
Right, but then even if the concussion itself was, relatively quote unquote minor, and they didn't have qualifying medical treatment, that particular question, yes, it would still be reportable because, well, actually I'm making assumptions. If they lost work beyond the day of the injury, it would be a lost time case and it would be reportable because of the time they lost from the injury.
Right.
All right, and we had one other question come through quick. Do allergic reactions count as reportable?
It's very,
Yes,
yeah, I
typically.
mean, it's case by case for sure, but depends what you're talking about. But most often, yes. Like a
Yeah, the
basic
biggest,
beast,
sorry, go ahead, Tim.
like a basic bee sting. If I got stung by a bee, my employer's not even gonna know about it because I don't have reactions. I have no, I whine and complain and cry about it and curse the world for it, but I don't have an allergy. I don't have an adverse reaction. I don't need an EpiPen. I don't need to seek medical treatment. Um, Someone who is highly allergic to bee stings is in obviously the opposite end of the spectrum, and that's going to be a reportable case for them. So it's a lot of these things are sadly case by case. It's not always black and white.
Yeah, and under that, one of the, in the next slide, frequently asked scenario is insect bites, bees, ticks. If if the employee is doing something work related when it happens, say they're an individual that's responsible for mowing a park, and while they're mowing, they stir up some bees and they're stung, and they do end up having a reaction because that employee was doing a work related task at the time, mowing it in this situation. That would be part of his job duty and would be underneath um, the reporting requirements because he was actively doing a job duty at the time. Same thing with a chipped tooth, also a reportable to us if it is done under the context that they are specifically doing a job function at that time. Chiropractic care is another one that is brought up frequently with us. And kind of our simple guidance to it, although as Tim alluded to in insect bites or bee stings, it can be a little complicated and are kind of on a case by case basis. But typically, if any of the above cases were related to work duties or aggravated by work duties and treatment beyond basic first aid was rendered, they'd be reportable to us. All right, next slide.
Just one quick question came through, Andy. The report is not due until March 1st, but must be posted by February 1st.
Yeah, it's the best understanding that we have from it, from that reporting requirement, is prior to it being submitted electronically, a lot of these were mailed to the department, and someone in the department manually went through and kind of put together a list for them. So that gave time for the mail to get these to our department at that time. By code, it needs to be posted by February 1st. Therefore, if you're not using a DSPS generated summary, you may be in a scenario where you already have it posted by February 1st, but it hasn't been submitted to us by then. And that gives time for you to submit that. I think kind of commonly amongst the inspectors, as long as they're in by March 1st, we accept that. But by code, they should be posted by February 1st. It's kind of a weird scenario. But that month in there is assuming that, oh, I lost my slide here. Hold on one second. Sorry.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry, Tim, chime in.
they're still using that. They being OSHA on the federal side, private sector side, they're still using those that date range as well. It's more historical than anything. I don't know if at some point it'll actually be updated and changed to reflect the electronic world or not, but
Yeah, it's more of a it's an administrative code kind of conundrum right now with that gap in there. Do we have other questions there, Lucas?
Nothing. Nope. We're having a few people having some issues with their computers. They're not hearing. But I would recommend they check their settings and their audio settings, make sure their speakers are working and their headsets correct and it's turned up. If not, I suggest you maybe restart your computers. Other than that, I really couldn't help you. I'm having everything come through clear here. So
Okay. All right, the next portion, counting days away and restricted work. So the two classification differences in these for the report requirements, days away are per a medical provider. So a doctor will provide you the information of the amount of days that the employee should be away from work. We count the calendar days. So regardless of if the employee works 2 days a week or 4 days a week, we count calendar days from the amount of time that from the injury until they return. We do not count the day of injury itself. So the days of work or the counting for days away starts on the preceding day after the injury. And that would be regardless of when the injury takes place. If it takes place on a Thursday, you start counting on Friday. If the injury's on Friday and they're off for say a week after that, you do start counting that next day, even though it may not be a scheduled day of work for them. It's based on calendar days. Restricted work also determined by a medical provider. Restricted work is restricted if it affects their essential functions of their job. So if you have an employee that injures their leg, but they're typically working at a desk and they're able to, with the work restrictions or the restrictions that the medical provider had put on, still able to do their core functions, they're still technically on restriction, but are able to do their primary job functions. They don't need to be counted. It counts calendar days again. As I stated before, it starts the day after the date of injury. We do not count the date of injury on either days away from work or restricted work scenario. And again, is also does not matter how many days a week the employee's there. We still count days, even if they're not quote unquote scheduled to be in the next day or a following day, they still count as calendar days. The case extends beyond a calendar year. Say you have an employee that gets hurt at the end of December and they are off work for a month. Those days where they are off work on days away are counted on the injury and illness report from the calendar year of when the person was injured. I've had a couple questions from people already this year about extended time into 2026 from injuries that happened in 2025. Those will be recorded on the year prior, and those reports in the ESLA portal can be edited up until July 1st of the following year to allow you to make edits to that report if needed for a job restriction transfer days away from work that extends into the following calendar year. If you have a case where an individual is injured and they have both days away from work and restricted days as part of their treatment process, say they're out for 5 days, but then are on restricted work for 10 days after that, you record in the classification of whether it's days away from work or restricted work, you record the most severe. So in that scenario, days away from work is more severe than a restricted work requirement, but we still count both. So you would have 5 days, it would be considered a case of days away from work, but then you'd still record 5 days away from work, and you would also record the 10 restricted days too. So always count the most severe type of restriction. And the maximum recording for each incident is 180 days. And as also why the report is editable until July 1st. If you have an individual that's injured at the end of December, hypothetically, they could be on work restriction or away from work for 180 days after that. So you can go in and edit the report if need be on those scenarios. Do we have any questions on that? I see some chat going back and forth.
Yeah, there's a couple questions in here. If an injury occurred in 2024, am I understanding correctly? If they were on restrictions in 2025, I am not reporting that all in 2025, especially the 180 days was met in 2024.
Correct. So if you had an individual,
a lot of questions that are leapfrogging some stuff, but yeah, your injury is it's all gonna stay on 2024 once you reach 180 days total cumulative between days away and days of restriction. Once you get to 180 in any way, shape, or form, you can stop counting days.
Yep. And then we had another one. Will the chat summary also be provided since there's some good Q&A going on in the chat? That's always available. You can always access that through your teams. So that's available at any time. Just go into your chat and that log will always be there. If you need any help with that, feel free to reach out and I can walk you through that. What else do we have? Do we count Saturday and Sunday if we are a business that functions Monday through Friday?
Yes.
Yeah, if you have, whether this employee works one day a month or 100 hours a week, none of that is relevant. What your work, when your workplace is open or isn't open, none of that matters. It's just purely calendar days. When that employee isn't, if they were called to work, say, hypothetically, if they were going to be called into work on Saturday or Sunday, although you guys don't work then, if they were called to work and physically could not do it because of their injury, then that's still a day away. Or if they physically couldn't do parts of their job because they're on restriction, if they still couldn't do it on those days, if they were miraculously called in, then it still counts as a day, regardless of their work schedule, regardless of your business schedule. Make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I think
Yeah, and
that's
if
all
there's
the questions. Go ahead. Sorry.
okay, I was just
sorry,
gonna say if there's other clarification, go ahead. Feel free to put it in the chat, and we can circle back on it as well. All right, another hot topic since COVID. What about employees who work from home? So the skinny of this is when you have an injury that's working at home. So a lot of this information came from a publication that OSHA had put out, and our adopted standards mirror their requirements. So injury or illnesses are recordable if they're directly related to work duties. Injuries and illnesses that occur while an employee is working at home will be considered work-related if the injury or illness occurs while the employee is performing work for pay or compensation in the home, and the injury or illness is directly related to the performance of the work rather than a general home environment setting. So if you have an employee who, say they tripped and fell in their house and broke their leg, that is part of the home environment, which by default is not under the purview of an employer's responsibility per se, and therefore it is not directly related to their work requirements. Most of the time, and scenarios that I could see for work related from home injury would be more related to ergonomics than anything else about their setup. If they're not being provided proper ergonomics training or workstation setup as you would in the office, that's where I could see something coming in from a home situation. I did have one several years ago. An individual hurt themselves while they were moving boxes of records in their house that was directly related to work, and that did come back because they were physically moving it from their desk back and forth. So when you're looking at work from home related injuries, biggest rule of thumb is making sure that it is directly related to the employee's work and not something related to the environment at home. If it truly was a work-related injury that happened, that's something that would be reportable then if it's determined that it is specifically work-related or directly work-related. If an employee is on a work restriction but working from home, the restricted time is still recordable unless they can perform their essential job functions. So if you have somebody that is injured and out of work, or injured and on a work restriction but able to perform their essential job functions, their time is not recordable if they're able to still perform their essential job functions. There's a link in here for some information, osha.gov/etools/computer-workstations. It's kind of OSHA provided guideline for working at home and some of the ergonomics information and reducing injuries related to ergonomics. As I stated, that's probably the biggest scenario that you would see from a work from home injury would be related to ergonomics, in my opinion, just from my experience here.
Andy, there's one more question that came through. Might as well just answer real quick. Just to double
Sure.
check, if an employee is out of work for 3 days and then has restrictions for 10 days, I would put 13 days in the days off category since that is the more severe category.
Nope, that's a great question and great clarification. So the type of injury would be reported to us as days away from work because that's most severe. So you would record the 3 days when you're filling out your report and entering the number of days, and you'd fill out 3 days for the number of days that the individual was off of work, and then you would just put in, I can't remember what the second number was, but the amount of days that the employee was on restricted duty. So they still, both numbers still get reported to us in their entirety, 3 days away from work and however many days it was on restriction or transport. But the case and the classification of the case is days away from work because that's most severe.
Yep, that's all right. So it's counterintuitive, but the another endpoint of what he just discussed. So you can have no cases in the case categories. You could have no cases of days of restriction, but still have a day total in the field in the next section of the summary. You could still have a day total in there with no cases that were marked as cases with restriction. And it is very counterintuitive. It doesn't look right, but depending on the scenario, it can be correct.
Yeah, we can, when we do our, we're going to do a live demonstration of submitting an injury and illness report in this too, and I'll make sure to cover that in the entry area of the report of how to do that and go to a specific scenario as discussion so individuals can see how that's submitted to us.
We have a couple more questions that came through here too. Assuming if working from home can count as a possible injury, other outside possibilities could also potentially be included, like field trips with students.
Yep.
Yes, if it and the big test comes down to is it part of their job duties. If the individual was assigned to a field trip on that day and an injury happened while they were in a different location, if it was part of their job duties that they're responsible to do, then it would be reportable to us.
Perfect. And one other question is, would volunteers who receive reimbursement for mileage be included on the report?
Yeah.
Ooh, I would think so. That's a unique one. If they're performing a duty and a required job duty for the employer and something happens, typically that's kind of the rule of thumb is what would happen. Would workman's comp cover them in a scenario, or would there be some sort of coverage for the employee should an accident happen? And I would think if they're being reimbursed for something, they're doing a job specific duty for the employer, then that would be reportable to us. And that same test of are they performing a function, a core function of their job or a job duty?
Perfect. Thank you. We've had a couple more come through. I want to keep answering these since we're on the topic. If you have a vendor that is also a part-time employee, do they need to be reported on the report?
If they're injured while they're a vendor and they're truly, I'll call it a contracted employee or a contracted working for a contracted company, those would not need to be reported.
Right.
There's a little bit of caveat with that, but it's a little complicated for this right now. But if say they're truly working, they're injured when they're being contracted, that's not reportable. If they're injured while they're working for your employer directly, then it would be reportable to us.
Okay. If you have an employee that could have come back to work with restrictions but opted to stay home unpaid, do you report all the days as away from work?
That's a great one.
I don't think you would.
Tim, I'll let you take this.
I don't think you would. If the employee makes that decision, that's their decision. I think that you would stop counting restricted days when the medical professional stops counting. restricted days.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
what I would go back to too, is looking at of who determines days away and restrictions, and that comes from the medical provider.
Mhm. And payroll and compensation, not compensation, all those other types of things. I mean, that goes beyond our scope. But as far as counting the days, I would say you're gonna have to follow what the medical professional says.
Right, and kind of leaving it up to the employee if they decide not to return. To me, that would be their discretion and not under the purview of what uh, um, the treating physician or the medical provider provided for the days away from work or job restriction or transfer, and I would go with that.
Okay, perfect. One more that came through. If someone is off for 180 days and then returns with restrictions, do they stop being reportable once they hit the 180 days off? Or are they
Correct.
reportable for 180 days off and then up to 180 days restricted?
It's a combined total of both. So if they have 180 days off and there's return with restriction, the maximum amount of days that it counts for is 180. Again, counting the most severe, so that would be 180 days of days away from work. If
Perfect.
there, just for clarification, if there's a combination, say there's a combination of 300 days between days away from work and job restriction or transfer, the maximum that we record is 180, regardless of what type it was. Once you add in days away from work and job restrictions, if those days get equal up to 180 or even more than 180, only 180 days are reportable.
All right, thank you. I think we can move forward.
Sure, we have some great questions on this one. The next is determining which employees are included in the report. So any individual who receives a payment from your employer is part of the report. So this may include full-time employees, part-time employees, seasonal employees, any elected or appointed officials, some other miscellaneous ones that we get, poll workers, recycling center folks in some municipalities, dog catchers, constables, anybody who's receiving payment from your employer. So if your employer contracts with a company to perform any work, these employees do not count in your report. So if your employer hires a cleaning service that does janitorial duties at your employer, and it's a company that your employer is contracting with to provide that, those employees do not count, as they are not under your employer's, I'll say, payroll, or not being paid by your employer's directly by the employer. So rule of thumb, if your employer issues a payment of any form for an individual for work or services rendered, that person likely counts on your injury and illness report. And then a kind of secondary test that you could do is, would your workers' compensation cover the employee in the event of an injury? And the reason I put this one in here is we have a lot of volunteer firefighters in our municipalities. And a lot of times, if those individuals are injured, while they're doing a volunteer, a quote unquote volunteer basis, their workers' comp in a lot of scenarios in the past has covered them from their primary job of being away from work. So if you have an individual who's injured, would they be covered under your workers' compensation policy? That's another great test to use in determining if it should be reported or if they count on the report itself. Next topic on the report, calculating the average number of employees. Depending upon the employer and payroll system that people use, this can be quite a task for some individuals. So the report uses consistency of employment during a calendar year, not based on the hours worked by the employee. So in clarifying that, if you have an individual who works 1 day a week throughout the entire year, they are counted as one for the purpose of the report because they are there during the entire calendar year. And then looking at, say, a seasonal employee, if you have a seasonal employee who works 6 months out of the year, they would count as a half a person in the report because they are there for half of the year, 6 months. So when we're looking at average number of employees, it's not based on the hours that they work. It's based on their length of employment during a calendar year. So on the second line of that, adding the total number of employees, add the total number of employees your establishment is in your establishment paid divided by your payroll periods during the year. That's the easiest way for some individuals to get to the average number of employees. So say you take say you're paid, your employer pays biweekly. So take the total number of checks issued during the entire calendar year and divide it by 26 for payroll periods. That will get you to the average number of employees. If you may have situations though where some individuals are paid monthly versus bi-weekly, some are paid just once a year. But breaking it down, it's going to the length of employment during the calendar year, not by hours. So a couple examples, township has 5 board members employed during an entire calendar year, despite only attending 15 meetings during the calendar year and each meeting lasting 2 hours. Each of the 5 board members is counted as an employee since they were all employed by the township during the entire calendar year. So that's kind of an extreme example of that for some of our municipalities, even though they're only at 15 meetings throughout the year. They're there the entire calendar year, therefore they count as one employee. Seasonal employee. A county employs 3 seasonal workers to assist with summer maintenance. The employees work from May to October, with each of the employees working for 6 months, half the year. Each employee counts as a half of an employee, 0.5 for reporting purposes. These 3 seasonal employees totaled would count as 1.5 employees for the report. You notice there's an asterisk there after the 1.5. When the total number of employees is added from all categories and departments across the employer, that number is then rounded up to the next whole number. A lot of times individuals end up with a half employee or quarter of employee. That number is rounded up to the next whole number for reporting purposes.
Andy, we got a couple questions here. We need to do a little clarifying on. We got to back up here a little bit. Had a couple questions about how do you count school teachers, school year employees? If you could give an example for that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So the looking of that is truly when they're employed. I know we have some districts that offer, and maybe all do offer, a year-round payment for their year-round pay for their teachers, and some offer just during the school session. It's truly when the employees are working. So say you have a teacher that does not work during summer break. To calculate the average number of employees for them would be to truly take their amount of work throughout the calendar year. So say they're only there for 6 months out of the year, they would only count as a half employee because they're not there during an off time. But also be careful with that and taking everybody as a group, because I know that there's a lot of districts that have summer activities and other things going on. So try to break it down as best you can and determining how many months out of the year that employee was there. It's probably the easiest to do it for a school district, is how many months was that employee working in their job function.
All right, perfect.
Hopefully that helps clarify that.
That does. And they had another question just to branch off that one. What about a substitute teacher who works sporadically?
So in that situation, if you're able to, my recommendation would be is if you're able to break out your substitute teachers' pay or the number of payroll checks that go out to those individuals, and then dividing it by the number of payroll periods you have. You may have a substitute teacher that works 4 times throughout the year. You may have one that maybe works 1. You may have some that work more significantly. If they're only there on payroll for 1 payroll period out of the year, and they're paid bi-weekly, to me, that when I break that out, that's 1/26 of an employee, because they're there for one of the payroll periods. And obviously every payroll period is different, but that's how I'd look at a substitute if they were there year round, is that they're only 1/26 of an employee for being on payroll for that one payroll period.
Perfect. And I'm just going to branch off the teachers. We'll get the teacher ones out of the way and then kind of go back. Another
Sure.
one, what if the teachers are there for 9 months?
So then they would be, that would be taking, that would take them down to a 0.75 because there's 12 months in the year. So they're working 9 months, which is 3/4 of the year. So a 0.75 is how they would be reported.
And then with that, could somebody ask, could we just take the sum of all the full-time employees? Our teachers are anywhere from 0.7, 3/4 to 9/10, 0.9.
Yeah, you could. One of I think the next slides on here discusses about, trying to give us your best representation of the number that you can. We do realize that trying to break out some of the information depending upon payroll periods and just the organizational structures of your employer, might be pretty difficult to drill down exactly for each individual person. If you can get a good average to us, that's what we're looking for, is the best information that you can provide without spending 3 weeks on trying to get the information.
Awesome. All right, next question. What if you have a fill-in worker and is technically employed all year, but only gets called in 2 days during the year?
I would go, that's an interesting one. I would say go back to how often they're paid. If they're technically supposed to be there year round, but they're only working, quote unquote, doing a job duty during, say, 2 payroll periods, they would only count for that 2 payroll period. Now, the tricky thing on that would be is if they were injured and they were, say, to be off for 100 days, because they're technically able to be employed or there for working and would be out, that would still count the 100 days, even though that they were only working, say, 2 days a year would count because they technically can't return to work. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, it is. All right, perfect.
Tim, you want to clarify anything on that?
No.
Sorry, I just saw Tim on mute. Okay.
All right, next question. Are contracted employees where the employer we contract with covers any work comp entries, do we need to add them to the average number of employees and total hours worked?
No.
Yes. Oh, wait. Sorry, say that again,
No.
Lucas.
Contracted employees.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
So they wouldn't count. That's their employer's responsibility.
Correct. Yep. Sorry, I heard it wrong. I was trying to look at chat. Yep.
It's all right. If one person works multiple roles over the full year, they are considered one person working all year, regardless of the number of roles they have, correct?
Correct.
Mhm.
Like, for example, you have an LTE that works 3 jobs type of thing. They are not 1.5 people. And I would say that is correct. They're just one person.
Yeah.
Correct.
One person can never be more than one person. But yeah, but as far as counting each pay period, if that person works 1 hour a pay period, but works every pay period, and you have another person that works 100 hours a pay period and works every pay period as well, both of those people are just one employee.
Correct.
Perfect. And what about supervisor elections that take place? Some supervisors are reelected, others are not. Would the outgoing supervisor be counted as a half and the newly elected supervisor also be counted as a half?
Yeah, and essentially they would just equal one employee then for that. If they're in for, like you said, half a year and then they're out, it would just be if you have a situation like that where that the person was replaced, or a new person came in during the calendar year to cover that role or that job duty, they still count as one total. And you could break it down if you want to go into, say, a 0.5 and a 0.5, it'd still come out to 1.
Yep. And then there's one, what he'd count seasonal employees. You only work summer months, May to August. I think we kind of covered that.
Yep. So in that situation, was that 3 months?
Yep.
3 months, so they'd be considered a 0.25 because they're only there for 3 months of the calendar year.
Yep. And then we have this other one that came through. What about election workers that work between 2 to 4 days per year? That was part of that example, but maybe go over that one more time. I think we had a few new people jump on.
Yep, I would, for election workers, do your best estimation for how long they're there. More than likely, depending upon how many elections there are in a year, say they're there for four payroll periods. If your employer pays biweekly, kind of line up when they would be there with the biweekly payments. And if they're there for 4 payroll periods out of, say, 26 on a biweekly pay period, they're considered, what would that be? 4 divided by 26. They would be considered a 0.15 of an employee technically. But note that you probably have multiple of them, so they may end up equating to one or more than one person, depending upon how many poll workers you have in the municipality.
Awesome.
Poll workers are a tricky one to count.
Yeah, they are. What about a board member who attends 2 meetings per month but only gets 1 stipend per year?
So the test for that would be is that board member's there for, I would presume, for the entire calendar year functioning in that role, even though they're only paid once per year. And we have some that only do one meeting a month, but since they're there for the entire calendar year in that role or that function, say as a town chairman, they count as one person on the report because they're there the entire year. So again, it doesn't matter how many hours they work, how many meetings they attend. It's truly based on looking at the employee and determining, did they perform their job duty during the entire calendar year. And in that situation with a elected official in a township or municipality, they're there for the entire calendar year. So they would count as one.
All right, we have one more question came through. What about volunteer fire department members that get paid once a year? I feel that would be the same as a board member that got paid once a year, correct, wouldn't it?
Correct.
Right.
Yep. Some municipalities track their volunteer hours and are able to break it out based on a pay period schedule on if they responded to a call or not. Others don't. In a situation where you're unsure or don't have that ability to track it, you assume that they're one for the report because they're there able to perform or they're performing the job functions during the entire calendar year.
Perfect. And just to clarify, our contract employees, do we need to add them as the average number of employees and not total hours worked? And the answer was no on that.
Correct. Yep. If their contract, you don't have to report anything based on their number of hours, average number of employees, injuries, illnesses, none of that for a contract employee counts towards this report.
All right. Thanks, Andy. One last question came in. How is the average number of employees determined, or do we just count the number? I'm not sure how you want to answer that.
Yeah, so the easiest way, if your employer pays on a set payroll schedule, say biweekly, 26 pay periods a year, the easiest way to calculate it is to take the number of payments that were sent out to the employees, so the number of payroll checks, the number of payments made to the employees, take that total, add all those up throughout the calendar year, and then divide it by the number of pay periods. So say you have 1,600 checks, or let's say you have 1,600 payment checks that go out in a calendar year and you're paid bi-weekly. You take the 1,600 checks divided by 26 would give you an average number of employees of 61.5. So number of payments issued divided by number of payroll periods is the easiest way to calculate the average number of employees.
Yes, you're counting every check you cut to an individual employee. You're not counting, well, I paid John once, I paid Jim once. You count every single check you cut to them, because the way that sentence looks on this slide, add the total number of employees your establishment paid in all pay periods. There's 2 ways to look at that. The incorrect way, which we get quite often, and it's not your fault, it's a poorly worded sentence, it's been that way forever. But some people will count, if I paid this person, they just count it as one. You're supposed to count all of those pay periods up, all those checks in every single pay period. So it's a big number. If you get your total number of employees as point something, you definitely didn't calculate it right.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I think that's all the questions we had in there for right now, if we want to keep going forward.
Sure. All right, then the next portion, calculating the total number of hours worked. So depending upon how your system breaks things out, hourly employees are relatively the easiest ones to count because you have a time clock typically that the employee punches in and out on, and it's easy to get a report of how many hours they work. And overtime hours do count towards total hours. So know when you have an employee who is working overtime, those hours are counted in the report. Salaried employees, easiest way to kind of break it out for them. If the employee is salaried at a full-time of equivalent of 40 hours a week, you can use a standard 2,080 hours minus any paid or unpaid time off. So that may be different for each employer based on how much paid time off the employees have a year. If you have an average that you're able to calculate of how many paid or how many hours of paid time off are averaged throughout the employees, I would be fine with that coming into my district. If you know that typically the average employee takes 2.5 weeks off a year, you can subtract those hours from 2,080 to get to your amount of hours worked for a salaried individual. If the employee is salaried on a part-time basis, use the average hours the employee worked multiplied by the length of employment. If the employee averaged 25 hours a week, multiply 25 by 52 weeks for a total of 1,300 hours. And I thought I had updated this to then have a reminder to take any paid time off or paid or unpaid time off of that total. But it doesn't look like I saved it. So just know any paid time or unpaid time off gets backed out of the total number of hours worked. Elected officials, this is a tricky one for a lot of individuals to count. This could also come down to also for volunteer firefighters under the same scenario. If you're unsure of the hours worked for an elected official, you could take the number of meetings attended during a year, multiply by the average length of the meeting. So a board member attends 17 meetings during a year. The average length of the meeting was 2.5 hours each. The member would have a total hours worked of 42.5. It'd be the 17 meetings times 2.5 hours. Same with a volunteer firefighter. Sometimes the fire departments in my area have an information on how many hours were put on to a specific call and the number of people that responded to the call. You could break that down to figure out roughly the amount of hours that those individuals are working. Note any leave time, whether it's paid or unpaid, does not count towards total hours worked. If unsure, we just ask that you use your best estimation on hours worked. For me, schools in my area are great. They track stuff very well, and the amount of hours that are worked by individuals. You get into some municipalities and there's different moving parts in a municipality that are a little bit harder to track, but that could come down to basically any employer as well. So again, use your best estimation. We don't want you spending, an excessive amount of time trying to calculate it. And if you're not sure or have questions or don't think your numbers that you're coming up with are right, reach out to the safety inspector in your area, and we're more than happy to help you calculate those and work with you. I have some that I'll just take and break down the different job classifications and work through people on getting the average number of employees. The total number of hours worked and the average number of employees. So feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help with that as well.
One quick question came through about that. What about hours that elected officials work outside of actual meetings?
Yep. Use your best guesstimation if you don't have a written number down for that or a log of those hours on how many hours they're putting in. Truly, if they're performing a task that's job specific, board members doing site visits or doing some sort of public outreach, that's part of their their job scope, I'll say, or their elected official scope, then those hours would count because it's towards the the job function or the job requirements and duties that are there.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, the next item to talk about. Some of you may have gotten this. It's kind of random. There's another reporting requirement that comes out that's in addition to ours and has caused some confusion over the years. It's a Department of Labor Bureau and Labor Statistics report, and it's truly a random sample. There's a state agency, the State Lab of Hygiene in Wisconsin, is contracted with BLS to do this study. It's a random sampling of employers throughout the year. This image here was from a letter that was sent out to one of our public entities in 2022 or 2023 for the 2022 reporting period. It is completely separate from our system and our reporting requirements. More than likely, if you've been selected for this year, you've already gotten a notice in the mail. Typically, they're sent out between November and December, and they notify you of your reporting requirements. And again, it doesn't exclude you from submitting your report to us. More information on that can be found, the links there, through the State Lab of Hygiene website for the occupational safety program that they have. And then on the second note with that, on the next slide, this typically is what will be mailed to you, what the envelope looks like. So it's pretty informative that it's required, and it is coming. If you can see from in the top of the screen, it comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics through the State Lab of Hygiene through the UW system. So again, doesn't exclude you from ours. It's just a random sampling. Some employers are selected over and over and over. I've had several that have been selected multiple years in a row, and I've had some that have never seen it before.
Andy had a question come through. Just to verify, the way you want us to report total number of employees and total number of hours worked are calculated the exact same way as a report on the OSHA Form 300?
Yes, correct. Tim, do you want to elaborate on that at all?
I'm typing and I hit enter instead of Avis. Ignore my answer. I have to finish that later. I was typing and not listening to what you guys are saying. You're talking about the OSHA 300.
Just to verify that total number of employees and total number of hours worked are calculated exact same way as the report on the OSHA Form 300.
Yeah, right. It's same that the methodology is the same between private sector and public sector. Yes.
Perfect. And then Nancy had one question. Are hours spent preparing for meetings counted as part of hours worked?
I would think so.
Yeah, I would too.
I don't.
Yeah, as long as it's a function of the, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Andy. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, if they're getting their stipend or their salary, they're not technically paid by the hour, but all those hours they're working are still part of the role, part of the job.
Yeah, sorry, I double muted myself there. Yeah, if it's related to the functionality or the function of the job or the core of the job, then it would count, whether it's prep or actual physically doing the meeting. It's still in part of that process for the job duties.
All right. Thank you for the clarification.
All right. Moving on. So completing the injury and illness report. So the injury and illness report's completed through the ISLA website portal. That's been the standard location where we've taken it since I think 2020, I think was the first year we did it. 2019, 2020, somewhere in there. If you're a new reporter or have moved since you submitted your last report, reach out to us. If once you created a login profile in ISLA, it always is there under your name, and we can reassociate that to another email or your new email from your new employer and link you to the new employer's reporting account. So like I said, if you say next year you move to a different municipality or a different school district, reach out to us and we'll get you linked to those. If you're new, this is your first time you're here, you haven't done the report before, contact your safety inspector. We have to do some back end work on our side to allow you the permission to create a public sector safety report, i.e. the injury and illness report. So the easiest way is just to reach out to one of us directly, your district rep, and we can work with you in getting those set up. All reporting accounts are already established in the ESA system. Please do not attempt to create new reporting accounts. There is a lock in the system that stops individuals from creating public sector safety accounts. All the accounts are pre-populated. If you're new, you've created an account, and like I said, we can get you linked to those. And if you have a login credential from a prior employer, or if you have a login credential from a prior, it should say employer, please contact your safety inspector to have a new profile created with the information for completing the report. Again, we can move those old accounts or the old login profile back over to you with the new employer. Any questions on that?
Nope, we're looking pretty good right now.
Okay, I'm just going to get this queued up here. Next, we are going to do a live demonstration. Just bear with me while I get logged in and my test account over here. Give me 1 second. Let me know when these dashboard's up.
Yep, I see you. You're good.
Okay. So this assumes you've already logged into the dashboard. So this is a live view of what the injury and illness submitting area looks like. So once you've been associated to an account, you have a login to go or ready to go, and you're linked to your reporting account. That's kind of where this will start off at here. So to submit your report to us from the permit tab, and note when you log in the first time, especially if you're a new reporter, it's your first time you're submitting a report for the the employer that you're at now, you may not have any old or prior submitted reports on your screen. So just know that you may not see this new the permits listed here. You may just simply have the permit tab, or maybe not even a permit, but everybody will see this new application button here, and that's where we go to submit the report. So I'll go ahead and click new application. And bear with me, I'm in a test environment, so it's a little bit slower than production in the live environment. So the first thing that we're prompted for is to select an area. It is filed under permits, even though it's a report to us, it's submitted under permits. Once we select the permits from the select area dropdown, it'll ask us for a program area. And we are going to select, we are going to select public sector employee safety. And then it's going to ask us to select a permit type / plan review, injury and illness report. There'll just be one option for this. Select application type, public sector employee safety. Again, there's just one option. And then the account. If you come in the first time and you go to create the report and you don't see an account listed, you'll need to contact your safety inspector so that we can link you to those accounts. Note if you have multiple accounts under your reporting login, each of those will be listed here. So you may have more than just one account listed. And once you have the right account, go ahead and select it and hit save and continue here at the bottom. Okay, then the next section is actually going through the report itself. The information up here in where it says personal information, this is all pulled from your account. So if you see something incorrect here, whether it's a name, email, phone number, reach out to your inspector. We can change those. Those are put on the account and aren't easily editable from the customer side, just in helping us keep our public sector safety accounts to the right people. So if you have an issue with either any of the contact information up type, reach out to us and we'll get that situated for you. The next section is public address. If this address that's listed here, almost everybody will have a address already listed from the accountant from previous years of submitting the report. If the address is incorrect, you can delete it with the garbage can icon over here on the right-hand side, and you can add a new address, or at any time, you can always add an address. And when you go to add an address, it'll pop up a location for you to input it. The one note that I have is if you're entering a new address, make sure to check the use this address as public button to save the new address onto the report. If you don't do that, it may cause you an error in the report. I'm going to assume that this address is correct, so I'm going to hit cancel here. And we'll get back to the main screen. So say your address that's listed on the report is correct, or you have multiple addresses, but one of the addresses listed on the report is correct already. Go ahead and click the checkbox under the public column to the left of the address here. And I'm going to do that. The screen's going to sit there for a second, but eventually it'll say address saved successfully with the blue check mark. That's what we're looking for. Now we can move on to the employment information. So we're just going to do some round numbers here for reporting requirements. So say I have an average number of employees determined by my calculations to be 10. And I have a total hours worked of 10,000. And then you'd input the number of cases. So this is classifying each of the categories for the type. And when we discussed earlier in scenarios where you have an employee that was both out of work with days away from work and also had days that were with job restriction or transfer, we'll go over how to report that here and just run through this scenario. So say we did have a situation with that, and we had an individual who was out for 3 days with days away from work and then was on 10 days of job restriction or transfer. Because days away from work is the most severe, we would record one case with days away from work. We wouldn't record anything with job restriction or transfer in this scenario. But when we get down to the number of days, we will enter in both the 3 days, we'll enter in the 3 days that the employee was away from work. And we'll also enter the additional 10 days that the employee was on job restriction or transfer. As Tim said, it looks kind of weird because you're reporting that there was 3 days away from work, which would in theory fall under this if you looked at it on the screen, and 10 days of job restriction or transfer. But since it was only one injury and they had both days away from work and job restriction or transfer, we don't need to complete anything in the job restriction or transfer cases, because the most severe case was that the employee was out days away from work. So we record 1 day away from work with 3 days away from work and 10 days of job restriction or transfer. And then the next step is classifying the injuries. In this situation, we're going to classify it as injuries. And note on here that the number of cases needs to match the number of injury and illness types. So if you had 10, if the sum of the 4 number of cases was 10, there would need to be 10 recorded in the classifications down here of number of injury and illness types. There is a check in the system that does happen if something doesn't match or something isn't right on the report, you'll get an error for it. So say I'm going to put one other reportable case in here to run through to show an example. But right now I have 2 reported case types. One was a case with days away from work, and one was an other reportable cases. But I've only classified them, and I only have one in the classification here under injuries. If I go ahead and hit save and continue, you'll see that we'll get an error here, and it'll tell us what the issue is. So other reportable cases, the total number of cases must equal the total number of injury and illness types. And I can click back onto that, and it's going to bring me back to this screen. And because I have 2 here, but only reported 1 in the number of injury and illness types, I'll need to change it. And we're just say 1 other illness. And now, because the classifications match. It'll allow us through, and the application review is now completed. And that information will pop up in under any of the scenarios. If you were to enter in a day with a case with job restriction or transfer or days away from work and not record any days and the total number of days, it'll also give you an error telling you what the mismatch is in the system. Once you're ready to submit, and what we do is we click the I accept under the electronic signature consent, and you type your name as it appears on the account, which is at the bottom here. And we hit submit. When you submit the report, it will get marked as submitted to us on the back end of our system. And then it will also email a copy of a confirmation that it was submitted to you via email. And in that confirmation email, there will be a PDF attachment that has a summary of what we showed earlier in the summary report. Will come to you, and that's what you can use to post at your employee posting area. You can also retrieve the injury and illness report at a future time from the dashboard by finding the correct one that was submitted. So this is for year 2025. So this is the one we just submitted, and we can hit print report. And it'll bring us to the summary as well. So here's the information that we entered. We had 1 day away from one case with days away from work, one other reportable case with 3 days away from work, 10 days of job restriction or transfer, and then the classification of the cases. One listed under injuries and one under all other illnesses.
Andy, I see Tim had his hand up. Tim, you have something to add there?
So yeah, that last one on the, I'm muted. Nope. Good question on the addresses, which is always a bit of an issue. Is there a way to change your public address after you've already selected one while you're doing your summary and you select that address? Can you still go back and change a public address? Or do you have to do that through your profile and manage
Nope.
business organization?
Yep. So if we go in here, and so I'll show you how to get back into this. Say you submitted this year, but you still had an individual that was injured in December that's still out. So say you wanted to come back in, 2 months from now and edit this. If you go to the report, you can go to edit application. Interesting. Okay. I believe this is just because I'm in a testing environment. When you're in here in the production or what you're using to submit this, when you come back to edit the report, there should be an option for you to come in and remove the address that we saved in there. So even if you put it in the first time and say it was the wrong address, when you add a new address into the system and you check it as using this address as public, the little checkbox that I had showed when you were entering a new address to make sure that you check, that will update the account information in our system to pull that address to you the next time you go in. So say you went in next year, the address that you most recently submitted to us will be listed in there. Like I said, in the portal that everyone will be using, you should have an option to delete this and change this even after I submitted it. And then from here to, say the individual ended up being out for an additional 15 days. I can go in and add the 15 days into the total and then resubmit this to the department. And what that'll do is when you've made that change, it'll again generate a new summary for you and email you a new copy of that. So anytime you do any editing from the portal side, you're going to get a copy of the updated summary report right away. Does that help answer that, Tim? Just displaying in production or in the testing environment differently. And if you run into an issue where you need to remove an address and can't get to it, just reach out to us. We can do it on the back end too. The inspectors can.
I don't know that she had messaged back in the chat, said no, mine says the same. So I don't know if she just Not able to change it in that way or what?
Um, yeah, if you, on one of the upcoming slides here, we'll have the inspector map, district map. If you just want to jot down the inspector, if you know who it is, just reach out to him directly and we can address that with you, and we'll look into why the addresses are not able to be edited after they're submitted. That may be new this year. If we just switched to a different back end system, it might be something that was an issue when we did that change.
I'm for everybody's reference too. I did put a link in the chat here with the public sector inspector map for you guys' reference too. And you have a couple questions that came through. I think we should just go through these real quick too. First one
Sure.
is, if we post on a shared Google Drive that all employees have access to, do we also need to physically post in each building?
If you have a location where the employees typically go to view items as far as notices, yes. If it's, say it's a division of just individuals that is only remote and they're never in an office, that would be fine. I would still post it though if you have a physical location where they're coming into in there, because it is required to be posted where employee notices are kept at per statute or per code.
Perfect, thank you. Next question is, once the IIR is submitted, is there anything else needed to submit or mail to the state? Also, do we have to complete the BLS forms and send?
Yes, so BLS is separate, and they will really track you down, from my understanding from other individuals who have gotten them. Their reporting system's a little bit different. They'll give you a login code. All the information, if you're selected for it, will be on the letter that's provided. They'll give you a login and a password to submit it. Once you've submitted your injury and illness report to us, there's nothing else that needs to be done unless you have a carryover case that you need to, say, update days away from work or days with job restrictions or transfer later on. But once it's submitted, you're good to go with us. The only other reporting, and this, I don't know where everyone's coming from today on the meeting, but if you're a municipality and you have a fire department, municipal clerks have to do a fire dues portion as well. It's kind of an sister department from us, and we can get you pointed in the right direction. Some of us can help you with that if it's required. Otherwise, we can get you in contact with the correct individual to assist you with that. And I believe Sarah's in here, and Sarah Brown is our fire dues person. I believe I think I've seen her name in the chat here today.
Yep, she's been in here.
Yep.
To bounce off the question about posting, so if there are 6 schools in a district, does the report need to be posted in all schools, in each school?
Yes, assuming that there's an employee notice posting area or an employee break room, yes, it should be posted in each location. Some school districts break out each school individually. Most individuals, and just for clarification, because this has caused some confusion with individuals in the past, most school districts, state agencies, counties, cities will report to us with one report, with all of their employees from all their various departments, buildings, locations. We accept that. That's totally fine. It's easier for some individuals to do it that way. But a lot of our larger employers or municipalities also post a summary that they do themselves for just specific to each building or maybe each department. However you want to handle that, that's completely fine, as long as it's posted, in an employee notification area. That's fine with us, however you break it out.
All right, let me see where we at here. If I have a volunteer firefighter that is available all year but only get paid once a year, are they each one full employee or one payroll divided by number of divided by 26 payrolls each year?
Since they're only being paid once a year, that would just be an annual payment. And with that, they would just be counted as one employee all year. If you were to have breakdown information of saying that they only quote unquote volunteered during, say, 13 of the payroll periods, then they would be a half a person. 13 being half of 26 payroll periods. But if they're only being paid annually, it's kind of like a board member from a municipality. They're there for the entire calendar year and able to do respond to calls, take calls, and as they're performing that job function, they count as one.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification there. Next question. Are the days away from work due to an injury or for any time the employee is out sick?
It's only for work related. So say you have somebody that is just on, say they get the flu and they're on, sick time for that, that doesn't count. It's only if it's work related. I mean, you could have an employee that, say you have a healthcare worker at a county run nursing home and they contract an illness that puts them out of work and is directly related to the work duties that they're performing or the work environment that they're in. That would count, but that would also go differently, more than likely through your workman's compensation program that determined that it was work related. If it's just simply they're out sick for 2 days, that doesn't count to us. It's only injuries and illnesses that are directly attributed to work that a medical professional makes a determination that it was work related. Hopefully that helps clarify that.
I think so. I think we're caught up too. I see Tim's working with Sarah in the chat to get her question answered. So I think we can move forward.
All right. The next location that I'm going to point everybody to is our DSPS Public Sector Safety website. The address is listed here, dsps.wi.gov/pages/programs/public safety. From there, let me actually just share my screen quick. Bear with me for 1 second and I will get us there. I think it'd be easier just to navigate to it. Okay, let me know when you can see the screen.
Yep, I got you. Sorry, couldn't get
Okay.
off mute there.
So this is DSPS's main website. From here, you can go up into programs and select A to Z program list. And our public sector safety program, it's alphabetical, is down here at Public Sector Employee Safety. And from here, we have a number of things that I can show you. One, our inspection district map is up here on the right-hand side. This will take you to the current map, and this is updated on an as-needed basis, but always the most recent version is here. And this will provide you a map of Wisconsin and the different districts that all of us cover. So I'm down here in the bottom southwest corner of Wisconsin in District 4. And my contact information, email, and phone number can be found in the corresponding district numbers down here at the bottom. You'll notice we have some vacancies right now from District 1, who Rhonda in District 2 is fielding most of that. And then District 6 right now is also vacant. We do have an individual hired in District 6, just working to bring them up to speed with everything. We cover a lot of different program areas, so it takes a little while for getting people onboarded. But right now, you can either reach out to myself or Rich Lampy in District 5 if you're in District 6, and we can work with you and the safety inspector that's in that area to go over that. And we just hired for District 1, but the individual has not been brought on yet, but it's in process. So that's where you can find the district map. I'm going to give you an idea of where to go to for questions with your inspector directly. And then down towards the bottom of the page, we have information related to forms, some FAQs that are in here, and publications. What I'd like to point out is in forms here, if you're new to injury and illness reporting or have some questions on how things should be reported, if they shouldn't or shouldn't be reported, the SBD 10.710 packet, which I'll open up here, has a lot of information that is directly related to reporting requirements, overviews, giving some code language of different requirements and thresholds of what counts. some basic information on what's considered first aid, which we also went over in the presentation today, determining if a case should be recorded or not. And then most importantly, I think in highlighting some of the information in here is that we have a flow chart that helps determine if the injury and illness should be recorded on the log, which essentially should be reported to us. So there's a flow chart here that can help you determine some of that information. And then a good FAQ and for determining, and some of the questions that were asked that come up frequently from individuals on does it count, does it not count, or kind of what's the stance been on the past for some of those questions that come up from individuals in more unique scenarios. And then also walks through calculating number of employees and that sort of thing. So take a look at that if you're newer to it or need a refresher. There's some great information in that packet. And then lastly, on the website, under publications, down towards the bottom two. So we have our guide here for injury and illness reporting. So if we open this, a lot of inspectors send this out in their reminder emails, but this is a step-by-step guide of how to submit the injury and illness report to us, going over how to enter and what to enter into the report here. So this step-by-step guide will help you with the visual representation of submitting that report to us. It's what we just went over in the live demonstration there. And then lastly, once this has been published, or once this has been saved and processed, we will publish it. But our last injury and illness reporting workshop that we did last year can be found here and is posted on our DSPS YouTube webpage. And we will update this one to put this workshop recording on as well. So both of them will be on there. So there's some good information on there. And as I said, if you have any questions, go to the district map and reach out to the safety inspector in your area, and we can handle unique scenarios, one-on-ones, things like that. Okay, I'm going to bring the PowerPoint back in here. Any questions on that? Did anything come up in the chat?
No, we're still sitting pretty good right now.
Hey. All right, so we went over the website. Again, I'll post this on here for a minute or so here for people to take a look at. This is the current district map here. Another thing to highlight is that we do have a tech box. It's listed right down here at the bottom, general questions, DSPS, SB, health and safety tech at wisconsin.gov. That is accessible to all of us in the public sector safety group, including Lucas. It's checked on a daily basis. If you have a quick question, generalized question, unsure of something, you can send your questions there. Ideally, work with the safety inspector in your area, but if you're looking for a real fast response on something, just with the amount of eyes in that tech box, can get some answers pretty quickly to people. All right. If there's nothing in the chat, we can go to Q&A if anybody has anything that they'd like to discuss in person or through Teams here, some higher level questions that are better answered that way. If you have a question and you want to keep posting in the chat, that's fine. If you'd like to discuss it, you can go ahead and click the raise hand button, and Lucas will unmute you so we can discuss freely and just chat about different scenarios if anybody has anything.
Not seeing any. Sarah Brown's got her hand raised. Let me go to Sarah Brown and unmute Sarah Brown. Sarah, can you hear me?
Yep, I can. I just wanted to, I did put something in the chat. I just wanted to let all you new clerks know, or even the clerks who are returning, if you need to get a hold of me for something, if you don't have my email address, I put it in the chat. I also wanted to let you know that on January 21st, I will be in Stevens Point with the Wisconsin Towns Association, and she's doing a clerk college, it's called, and I will be there doing a kind of a demo on how to do self-certification. I don't know if that's going to be available via Teams or not. That would be something you could reach out to me, and I can put you in contact with the lady that is setting it up. But I just wanted everybody to know, we self-certification seems to be going pretty smoothly. There have been a few hiccups where the clerks will try to update the like the highest elected official information or their address, and when they click on save, it gives them an error message, or it says null and then error message. If you get that, just reach out to me directly, and I will look into it right as soon as I can. But usually what I'm finding is I just tested it a little bit ago in our test environment, and it seems to be working right. But I think Andy said earlier that, we just changed to a new back office type thing. You guys didn't notice anything different, but we have noticed a few little glitches and kinks that we're trying to get worked out. So if anybody has any questions for me right now, go ahead and ask away, put them in the chat or whatever.
Yeah, and just note, the program that Sarah's referencing to is for fire dues, and if you're with a school, county, more than likely you don't deal with it. If you're a municipal employee or municipal clerk, you may. So just some clarification on that. Yep. And then we had a question pop in about the recording. The recording will be posted on their publications on our website, but if you want to put your email into the chat, we do have an email list going for notifications when that's done. So if you'd like a notification for one that's published and a link to it, go ahead and throw your email in the chat and I will get you added onto that list, and we'll send out an email from our tech box once that's been published.
Perfect.
I think that's the easiest way to do it. And then I'll also, at the same time, I will get a copy of the slides out as well, and we'll include it on that email. Oh yeah, we have a lot of them. Perfect.
Coming through.
I was just gonna say, be careful what you wish for, Andy.
No, that's a good thing. Does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to discuss? Not through the chat.
Yeah, and if you have anything that comes up throughout the year, we're always open for suggestions and adding, topic items in the PowerPoint that people come across to kind of get broader information out there. So if you come across something while you're doing your report and aren't sure how to do it, or it causes some confusion, let us know that, and we can make sure to incorporate that into next year's as well. Just keep adding items that come in for scenarios, unique scenarios. And I already took notes on a couple that came through from questions. There's a few good ones in there this year to cover for next year's.
Yeah, there's definitely some new questions there. So thank you everybody for the input and the interaction here as well. I'm going to say one more time, if anybody's got anything they want to ask, feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll probably end the meeting here. Any other questions you want to put in the chat too, feel free to get those in.
Yeah, it looks like we still have some emails coming in here. We'll give it a few minutes for people to get their email in here.
Well, perfect. I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. It's appreciated. I hope this helped everybody out. And like I say, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, the inspector in your area. Otherwise, like you say, reach out to the tech box as well. And somebody from the department will get back to you as soon as they can. Thank you again. I hope everybody has a good day.